Thank you all for coming. Julia, I am going to make you co-host. But my name is Natalie Rodriguez. I am Executive Director for Hopeful Beginnings. We are hosting a series of conversations about the state of Illinois adoption. As a DCFS licensed domestic adoption agency, we've been seeing definite shifts and changes in domestic infant adoption. And so we really wanted to lay out some of the ethical practices and some of the concerning issues we feel that we have maybe a voice and would like to see improved. So with that, I am going to hand it to my adoption team, which is headed by our clinical director, Julia Kitzinger. And Julia, I have made you a host, so you'll be able to share our PowerPoint today.
Great, wonderful. I'm pulling that up now as we speak. Well, welcome everyone. This is kind of our hope and presentation. Really just wanting to bring awareness and just more psychoeducation related to adoption and what we are seeing as an agency, working with both families that are hopeful and prospective adoptive parents, but also expectant parents who are considering adoption as an option for their child. And then throughout our time, we also do experience working with other adoption agencies around the entire country, which definitely brings light to some of the things we're seeing on the ground. Really, take it away for us.
Hey everyone, my name is Orly. I'm another adoption worker. And so to start off the presentation, I wanted to start by talking about what adoption actually is and what it can look like. So adoption is the placement of infants for adoption by their birth parents who legally consent to the adoption with an adoptive family of their choosing. A lot of these cases, birth parents are in the driver's seat. All of those decisions are made fully by them. And completely on their own pace. It's a permanent decision and it's one that should be handled with a lot of care. Birth parents oftentimes are making these decisions out of love. It's because there's a certain level of chaos going on in their life, or it's not the right time to parent, and that's something that they can recognize and want to pass on and give their child a happy, healthy home.
And I'm going to interject here. As Hopeful Beginnings, we do know that a lot of the conversation in the media can be adoption as an alternative to abortion. What we see on the ground is most prospective birth parents are coming to this, making a decision between parenting and adoption. We see adoption as one of the three choices, and that parents are really entitled to make informed decisions. I'll hand it back to you, Orly.
Absolutely. Um, So moving forward, wanted to touch on sort of how we can see adoption looking like in the media as well with unethical adoption situations. Very oftentimes it can get misconstrued because of, the large price point that can come with adoption, where people can speak about it sort of as if it's buying a baby. This is not what adoption is. Adoption is also not making promises to a birth parent that can't be kept. Oftentimes, in unethical adoption situations, there's sort of a financial pressure put on birth parents, whether it's relocating them or making promises of, a lot of financial stability in place of their child, and that's not what this looks like. In Illinois, birth parents are absolutely able to receive financial help, but it shouldn't look like a trade-off for a child. That goes into the coercing or incentivizing the birth parents into placing a child, as well as assuming that adoption ends right after surrenders are signed. It's a big decision. It's a lifelong journey that includes growth and ongoing communication. A lot of the times, adoption nowadays is paired with a level of open adoption and sharing that story with the child so that they can feel good about where they came from. So to go, I know this is a lot of words, so I'll try and condense it down a little bit because ethical adoption can look a lot of ways, and these are the things that we prioritize at Hopeful Beginnings. A lot of it starts with following proper surrender laws. In Illinois, once birth mom delivers, her consent is not valid unless it's given at least 72 hours or 3 days after the child's birth. Same goes for birth father if they are named. So there should be proper time given to make this really challenging decision. And signed consent has to be given without pressure and fully explained in the birth mom or birth family's native language. There have been times where we have translated surrenders just to make sure that this decision is being made in good conscience. Another thing that should be done in ethical adoption is tons of education for adoptive parents on the entire process. This includes explaining the adoption process to them very well and also teaching them how to handle sharing that adoption story with their future child, how to take on challenging conversations that might come when your child's a different race than you. And including how to communicate with birth parents and working through an open adoption. So that education piece is very important. Another aspect of ethical adoption would be treating birth parents with respect and dignity. Just like I said earlier today, this is a challenging decision and it's not one that should be taken lightly. And birth parents need to be treated with that respect and dignity for the hard decision they're making. Birth parents can look from all walks of life, ages, backgrounds, circumstances. Very often in the media, you see birth parents looking some sort of way, which we'll talk about a little bit later when we talk about language around birth parents. But there really is a large range of walks of life that we are seeing and working with. So as I mentioned earlier, they're entitled to financial support to meet their needs. This also includes counseling. That's something that our agency offers and can be very beneficial for birth parents. As well as the last little step of ethical adoption is really working to create an adoption plan that is best for birth parents. As I said, this can weigh heavily on a birth parent, and when agencies and different families can approach birth parents with empathy and not judgment, it can build stronger connections and healthier adoption.
And I think a huge point to make here is everyone's, every agency's ethical, spectrum or barometer that we have is different. And from Hopeful Beginnings perspective, we really hold these as our core pieces to how we want to give both birth parents, expectant birth parents, and prospective adoptive parents throughout this process, because there is not a lot of regulation for some of these. So it lands on workers and agencies as an ethical perspective. And this is something that we are hoping, can improve across the board with some legislation.
Right. So, hi, my name is Megan. I'm another adoption social worker at Hopeful Beginnings. I'm also a birth parent counselor, so I will soon be providing some counseling services to a lot of our birth parents here. But I'm going to start by talking about some of the proper language that is strengths-based that we use when talking about adoptions. So the goal with using proper language is to not create an atmosphere of shame or guilt when talking about adoption for either the adoptive parents or especially for the birth parents. So appropriate language regarding adoption would be terms like birth parent, birth child, place for adoption, make an adoption plan, or finding a family to parent your child. This is instead of using terms like real parent, real child, give up for adoption, give away, putting your child up for adoption, terms that could potentially make a birth parent or even an adoptive parent feel like they're lesser than in any way.
And I think some
What's
of
he
these
chewing on, Lukey? Get that out of his mouth. Thank you. Hand it to me. Hand whatever he has over to me. Thank you.
Julia, do you want to mute Chelsea?
I'm trying.
Oh, sorry, I didn't realize my audio was.
It's okay.
So then we
Oh
just
no.
wanted to go through and talk about the different types of adoption professionals. So there are a lot of different kinds of adoption professionals out there, and each of them, oh,
So sorry. Hold on. There we go.
yeah, so there's a lot of different kinds of adoption professionals out there, and each of them kind of handles their approach to adoption differently. They all have their different strengths, weaknesses, ethical approaches, financial structures. So it's important to know the differences between each of them. So first off, there's for-profits versus nonprofits. For-profit agencies operate as businesses designed to generate revenue for the owners while using large-scale marketing to match families efficiently. Then there's nonprofits, which operate as tax-exempt organizations that reinvest all surplus funds back into the community programs and support services. Then there's national versus local. National utilize a multi-state network to offer shorter wait times, but they also often require out-of-state travel and a lot of remote communication. So maybe you might not get to meet like the birth parents beforehand, or you might have to travel out of state a lot to get that communication. So it's not always the most efficient method. With local agencies, they provide a lot of personalized support and convenient services, but operate with a smaller pool of birth parents, so there might be some longer wait times with placing, that kind of thing. Consultants are independent paid advisors who help the adopted parents, and it's important to specify here only the adopted parents, not the birth parents, by creating a customized plan and broadcasting their profile to multiple agencies. And then finally, attorneys are licensed legal professionals who specialize in family law to ensure that an adoption complies with all state and federal laws, legally finalizing that transfer of parental rights.
Yeah, and I think one thing I just want to add is when we're talking about a national agency or a local agency and the differences between those, when we're talking about shorter wait times, I think that, like Megan said, it is a huge thing that national agencies like to advertise for themselves, that they will, give you a shorter wait time. And I think personally that could look way more attractive to a vulnerable prospective adoptive parent that has probably gone through a lot of time and years of either trying to conceive themselves with a fertility clinic. And sometimes that is not always the case. I have definitely seen it be shorter, but I've also seen it be longer than small local agencies. And when prospective parents that may not know all the things that adoption agency professionals know, they could be taken advantage of in those senses. And I'm always going to go back to ethics of how that can portray to vulnerable populations.
Yeah, so that kind of feeds into what we're going to talk about with finances here. A lot of national and for-profit agencies tend to be more expensive than the local or nonprofit agencies, just because of the different types of services they provide and because of what they're doing to offer those shorter wait times. So a typical adoption from Hopeful Beginnings typically costs around $35,000. And what you're getting with that $35,000 is the adoption application, our home study, our program fee, and our placement. And all of those are for one-time non-refundable fees. So you only have to pay those once. Whereas at a bigger agency, you do have to pay for that home study every single year when it gets renewed. So that's one key difference there. So we compared that to American Adoptions, which is a national agency where you would typically be paying around $50,000 to $85,000 for an adoption. And included in that fee is the application fee, which is around double what our application fee is, as well as national marketing and outreach, case management, a risk management fee in case a mother changes her mind and chooses to parent her child, legal fees, the birth parent's living expenses, medical bills, the home study that's billed every year, as well as the finalization placement. So it's just important to look at the different fee structures and what you're actually paying for when you're looking at the different agencies.
Yeah. I will say one of the reasons that we felt it was really needed to have these public discussions about adoption was because of the increasing amount of families that are coming to us, maybe as second-time adopters or coming in from other agencies where they are incurring these really high costs. We believe that prospective adoptive parents should be seen for their merit and not just their financial ability. And it really is a much healthier ecosystem in adoption if we have a diverse pool of parents that are wanting to adopt. And that way, when we work with prospective birth parents, we can really have conversations about what they envision for the life of their child and their baby and really have families that meet those needs. So some birth parents might prefer a family who lives in the city versus the country, or a certain ethnic background or a certain racial background or different, vocations. And what we really hope to maintain is a system that supports not just wealthy families adopting children, but all families that have that calling to parent through adoption be able to.
Mhm. So we just wanted to give you some numbers, some stats. I did pull these from the National Council for Adoption, and we can see since 2019, I couldn't get anything past 2023, but throughout these years, there is definitely a decrease, a significant decrease in the number of adoptions in this country. And we are noticing that the overall birth rate is also going down and decreasing as well. And I think the other misconception is there are, 10,000 adoptions a year, and that is truly not the case. I think, as you see here in 2023, there was a little over 1,200. And, what that could represent for domestic adoption, I think speaks, big numbers. We just wanted to give you kind of some stats here.
Yeah, and just to clarify, that's domestic infant adoption, right, Julia?
Yes, yeah. There are other numbers on the National Council for Adoption website that are upwards of 20,000. Those include adoptions that have been facilitated through foster care, through DCFS. Yeah, so our kiddos that are placed through domestic infant adoption, also you can hear the words private adoption, same domestic adoption. Those are voluntary. Huge part of I think it reflects the number because this is something that mothers and fathers are doing voluntarily because of a particular situation that they're in, versus foster care, those are done involuntary. The courts are terminating parental rights.
Thank you.
So open adoption. Our agency is, and I know many, many other agencies in the state and in the country are huge advocates for open adoption. And open adoption really benefits everyone in the adoption triad: the birth parents, the adoptive parents, and the adoptees, the adopted kiddos. Open adoption allows information to be shared between both adoptive parents and birth parents for the child. And this can look a bunch of different ways. This can be emails that are sent between parents, phone calls, text messages with pictures and updates, even FaceTime calls. I have a lot of families that FaceTime each other, have in-person visits a few times a year. And if that might be a little too much for birth parents after they have placed, letters are always an option that can get sent through the agency, even hard pictures that we can pass along. This really is something that we want birth parents to take control and share what they are most comfortable with during this process. Because we are hoping, honestly, we would only accept families that are open to open adoption in terms of adoptive parents. And if it's a closed adoption, it's really because birth parents are not ready at the time. But we have found through the research that open adoption is truly the best situation for the adoptee. This really allows for connections to be maintained with the child's birth parents, birth grandparents, birth siblings. It helps stay and maintain that connection, even though they are not parenting their child every day. It also helps the birth parents, through the grieving process. I have been with birth parents who have facilitated and been a part of an open adoption visit, and they have told me this has reassured that I made the right decision. It has shown me firsthand that the people I trusted before my baby was born are loving my child and giving my child the life that I wanted for them, and this is helping me not having my child with me every day. It also can provide the child with adequate medical information. As we all know, we are constantly learning about our own medical health, and things happen as we age. And sometimes when the child is placed, the birth parents don't know all that they may be diagnosed with at the time, or their family members may be diagnosed with. So an open adoption really can allow the constant sharing of new medical information that could be very impactful for the child as they grow. This also gives the children an opportunity to really go to the source with any questions that they have. Who do I look like? I do this. Do you do this as well? It really gives them that autonomy to ask their birth parents directly questions that their adoptive parents unfortunately just cannot answer. And they shouldn't force an answer, right? They didn't give birth to them. Their genes are not theirs. And open adoption really gives the opportunity to the adoptee to find that information that's accurate for them. And it also maintains this cultural and racial connection. There are times, like in this beautiful picture, adoptive parents don't match the race of the adoptee. And that is a beautiful thing. Our agency, creates many different looking families. And in times when this happens, when there is an open adoption, it does give the adoptee and the adoptive parents an opportunity to go to the birth parents and say, what foods can we, make at dinner time that you would have made at dinner time? What cultural festivals do you go to? What music do you listen to when you clean the house? All of these little things that the child would have experienced, they are still able to experience directly from their birth parents and learn about those things. And it's an educational point for the adoptive parents to really embrace their child's culture by birth, in addition to, their adopted culture as well. So the Department of Children and Family Services, as we all know, DCFS. For those that don't understand the process or aren't educated on it, DCFS is the agency, the company, I don't really know what they're called, the program that gives agencies like Hopeful Beginnings our licensure and to give us the permission to legally go through adoptions in the state of Illinois. And unfortunately, in our experience, the audit process and just really anything but the licensure giving themselves is not very regulated. For example, there is a manual that we have as a licensed DCFS agency for domestic adoption. We have a manual, a handbook, you could say, that makes sure on the prospective adoptive parent side, I know exactly how to work with them, what they're entitled to, what I should be doing in terms of vetting them to take in a child and raise a child that they did not give birth to or, biologically create, and how they should be treated. And yet I don't have a same manual for how birth parents should be treated and cared for, and not necessarily vetted, because we don't want to vet birth parents, but more just how should they be treated? What as an agency should we provide for them in terms of really filling in all the bubbles of their life to make sure that they are adequately supported and advocated for? And I think that is a huge gap in what we are given from DCFS as a DCFS licensed agency for domestic infant adoption. And as a licensed agency, we are audited, as we absolutely should, from DCFS every single year. But we find that these auditors are not adequately trained to audit domestic adoption agencies. It appears that they are very knowledgeable on foster care agencies, but when it comes to this private domestic adoption, which in 2023 there were only 1,200 of them, they don't really understand the type of adoption that we do and all that goes into it. And it really makes us, educate them on the topic, but I feel like the auditor should know things in those manuals that we are entitled to be knowledgeable and then follow through with for the adoptive parents through the process. I think it's very important for the auditor to be educated and knowledgeable on that as well, so that they can ensure that agencies like Hopeful Beginnings and others around the state are doing and following that code to the level that they should. When they come to us annually, it's an automatic assumption that we are a foster care agency and we operate as such. And that is not true. We do not do foster care agencies or foster placements. So again, it's us kind of educating them. And this goes back to ethics, like I have been throughout this presentation. If agencies are not following that manual, this is their opportunity to potentially miseducate or misinform the auditor based on how they are facilitating interactions with their clients. And that's not okay, in all honesty. We should always treat clients the way that they deserve to be treated: respect, advocate, empowerment, education. The other thing we're finding is, unfortunately, with a lot of aspects of DCFS, the auditor themselves changes a lot. And I wish I knew the answer to that, but we go through a lot of different auditors, which also creates an environment where we're constantly having to educate someone new on the type of adoptions that we do and how that legally has to work in this state. Because again, like that third bullet point, unfortunately, they don't understand the law and what domestic adoption brings, and how legal adoptions can take place when it comes to voluntary adoptions.
Yeah, and I think with this, what we are advocating for, we know that DCFS employees and staff members are overworked and overstressed and overburdened. And we feel it would be advantageous to everyone involved, from the DCFS staff to the families affected by adoption to the adoption agencies, if there was truly a standardization, and like Julia was saying, there was standard guidance provided to state agencies. We know that throughout the history of adoption, unfortunately, many people who felt that they were doing good by their own ethical standards have really harmed families. And what we would love to see is we would love to see all the research around attachment, around brain science, all of the, ethics that we are proposing, that how Julia said, families deserve to be empowered and treated well on both sides, on all sides of the adoption triad, really. Are the expected, behaviors of an adoption agency, and that it is not based on any individual's decisions.
So when it comes to our agency, Hopeful Beginnings always provides lifetime support. We really believe adoption decisions should follow adoptees, their adopted parents, their birth parents, their whole lives, because adoption is a lifelong process. Adoptees, birth parents, adoptive parents, they're constantly growing their own identity and how adoption fits into that. And they may be ready for extra support at different points of their life. And an adoption agency really should be there when they are ready, whenever that comes for them individually. And we believe in that wholeheartedly. So we do offer lifetime support for all people of the adoption triad. We really believe it's our mission to empower women and families to build nurturing homes for children. This is our mission. It is what every worker here holds near and dear to their heart. It's what kind of drives us to be an employee of this agency. We value empathy, inclusivity, empowerment, excellence in care, respect, and innovation with purpose. We really try to provide all of these values when working with clients, no matter if it's an adoption or another program of the agency, and always trying to figure out how can we best support our clients and what barriers do we have to help eliminate to give them the care that they need from an adoption competent perspective. We really hope that our systems and laws can promote the same. We really believe that these are core values of how people should be treated. And, we find that sometimes there are gaps in working with adoption professionals around the country, that people just don't hold this same level of lifetime support as they should for their adoption clients. So what are we asking from you? We I understand. I know it's an odd ask for an agency to ask for more legislation, regulation, more oversight from DCFS, but we really find the importance in how we are treating clients and how and everyone, no matter what agency they decide to work with, because it is their choice, that they are treated with the things I just mentioned in the last slide. So we're really asking for some more legislative regulation at our state level of Illinois. This can include a variety of things. I know earlier in the presentation we mentioned that legal surrender forms should be given in the birth parent's native language. There is no state regulation currently that says that we should translate those legal forms into their native language. And we should. As Hopeful Beginnings, it's, kind of part of our ethical code that we know to do that. But I think as a legislation regulation, we should definitely build that in as just an example. The second thing we're asking is to help us create more structured oversight from DCFS. Like I kind of mentioned, there are some really significant gaps that we're noticing in our audits, and I'm sure other agencies are noticing the same. And really just wanting some additional structure to ensure that all clients that are served from any agency are deserving and receiving the right type of care. And then the last thing we're asking from you is help us advocate for the systems and resources in place for birth parents. There are some currently, we can always, expand that, but really help us advocate for what birth parents are entitled to and what they deserve in this time. This is a very emotional time for birth parents if they are considering adoption or have chosen to place their child for adoption at any point in their life. And they deserve the respect, the empowerment, and the support that they ultimately deserve. And we want that to be statewide.
Okay, I'm going to stop the recording now and we can go into questions.